Hello, my name is Nathan Leahy, the Field Service and Sales Engineer for Weldability SIF, responsible for the building, testing and repair of our welding units, welding fume extraction units, and our air monitoring device, the Protectoscan EDI. What I'm going to go through with you today is how to go through the process from start to finish of choosing the right piece of fume extraction for you. So you've probably received a letter or a HSE visit, and maybe you've heard from a friend or a partner in the industry that welding fume was recently reclassified as carcinogenic in February 2019 of last year. So there's now a legal requirement for all welding fume to be extracted at source, and of course not just welding fume, but any other fume and dust that could be designated as a contaminant should be extracted before it goes into the breathing zone of your users. So what are the risks of ignoring it? Well, you're liable to get fines from the HSE. So if you get a visit and they see that you haven't got extraction or your extraction isn't suitable, they'll give you a breach notice. This can go all the way up to partial or a full closure of your business if they find significant amounts of breach notices or they think that there's a large danger to your workers. In terms of the long-term risks, if any of your employees develop long-term health conditions, maybe 10, 20, 30 years time, and they can directly attribute those conditions to one of your work processes and prove that you didn't have suitable LEV at the time for them, then you would be liable to a lawsuit. And then on the smaller end of the spectrum, you may buy the wrong product, and so it's wasted time and wasted money for you. With all of these things, you can sort of nip them in the bud by just calling us first. So if you're due for a HSE visit, or if you're concerned about a future HSE visit, you can call us and ask us for advice. We can tell you what sort of things that they'll be looking out for and what things they might pick you up on. In terms of preventing those long-term lawsuits, we do have machines that can do air monitoring 365 days a year, so that you can sort of keep on top of your fume extraction and have solid proof that would be useful in a court case to say, you did have fume extraction and you have the data to say that it was working at the time. And of course you can call us, tell us what your work processes are and how often you do them, and anything else, and we can recommend you a good piece of LEV. So in order to get around these things, we need to arm ourselves with a few key questions. The primary one being, of course, what are the processes that produce contaminant? It's well worth calling us and saying what all of your work processes are, and then we can give you an idea of which ones will need extraction or not, because there may be one or two that you may not have realized did need extraction, that a HSE inspector might give you a breach notice on. The other thing is to consider what your constraints are. So your workshop size, if it's got a particularly low ceiling, then you won't be able to fit a fixed extraction system in there. If there's not a whole lot of floor space, then it wouldn't be viable to have a couple of mobiles wheeling around. The other thing to consider is your workers' ability. So could they wheel around or push or pull a large piece of machinery? And another thing to consider is location. So if you're under any environmental laws, that would sort of decide whether you would need to have your exhaust stack filtered or not. And if you weren't, then you could just use a cheaper vent to atmosphere system. Another thing that a lot of customers don't always consider when they're choosing LEV is just how much of your work process do you do. So those of you that just have a small maintenance welder in the back of a workshop somewhere that does sort of less than 200 hours a year of welding, you could just buy a small cost-effective disposable filter unit, and that would get you your LEV conformity without you having to spend lots of money. If, however, you had lots of welders doing more than 200 hours of welding a year, then you would definitely need to look at something with cleanable filters, because it would save you a significant amount of money in the long run by choosing a cleanable unit over those sort of 3 or 4 years. The other thing to consider when you're looking at LEV is the ongoing costs. There is no system that is buy it and forget. There is always going to be some kind of ongoing cost. It just might be smaller depending on the systems you've got. So this can range from having disposable filters needing to be changed constantly, or cleanable filters do need to be changed after about 3 to 5 years, as well as maintenance of the system and your annual LEV testing. So this is called a thorough examination and test, also known as a text report. This is a legal requirement, it has to be done every 14 months, but most people get them done yearly. And it's just sort of like a health check for your LEV system. The other thing to consider, and this is something that gets forgotten about quite frequently, is training on the correct use of the LEV. So if a HSE inspector comes on your site and sees that a welder has a piece of LEV, he's going to ask that welder if they've been trained. And if the welder says no, then the HSE inspector will pick you up on it. So the easiest way around these things is here at Extractability, as standard on all of our mobile fume extraction units. Once the unit is delivered, we will send an engineer to site free of charge. We'll build it, commission it, and send a thorough examination and test report on the day. And we will train all of your staff that need to use the unit on how to most effectively use it. And then you just need to write up a document for your staff to sign to say that they've been trained, and then you could produce that to a HSE inspector should they ask. So that would sort of get you around quite a few of those problems. So now that we've got those key questions in mind, we may or may not have had some of them answered already. We would then look at what type of system would suit our needs. So if you're doing off-site work and you need a mobile system, or you need something to extract from a on-torch extraction, then you look at a high vacuum system. If you needed a mobile or a number of mobiles to wheel around a large workpiece, then you would look at something like the Protecto Extract or the Protecto Extra. If you had a large quantity of workers who all needed welding extraction and they were all welding in booth, then you'd probably look at a fixed system, either with a filtered or unfiltered exhaust stack. And another thing to consider is whether you're extracting explosive or flammable dusts, because you would need to have a system that's designed to reduce the risk of fire in that case. And the thing to consider is if you can't see a system in our range that fits these exact requirements for you, then you can call us and we can always build a bespoke system to suit your needs. So let's have a quick look at a scenario. So Letchworth Sheet Metal received a HSE visit. They were told they needed LEV for welding, grinding, oil mist, and the HSE inspector told them that they needed annual LEV inspection. So in this case, the LEV inspector has been fairly kind to them. So Letchworth Sheet Metal has been told they need to extract welding fume. So the questions they're going to ask themselves are, do we want mobile or fixed? So do we have room for a fixed system, or do we need a mobile system to wheel around a large workpiece? How many welders have we got to extract from? So maybe buying 20 mobile welding units is not going to be sort of cost effective for us, and so we should look at a fixed system instead. Are our welders doing lots and lots of different processes? So should we perhaps look at a machine that could do welding, plasma cutting and oxyacetylene, in which case we would probably recommend the Protecto Extra over the Protecto Extract. And a lot of our machines can also extract grinding dust as well, which we'll go on to in a second. The other thing, as I mentioned before, is to ask yourself how many hours a year do we do this work process. So if you're doing less than 200, you would look at a disposable filter unit, and if you're doing more, then you would look at a cleanable filter unit. This is just to get those cost savings of not replacing filters over sort of 2 to 3 years. The next thing they needed to extract was grinding. So again, they'd ask themselves, do we want a mobile or fixed extraction system for grinding? Do we want an extraction bench so that we can put vices and clamps on it and do our workpiece within this bench? Or do we just need a hood above like a linishing machine or something to extract some of that fume and dust there? The other thing to consider with grinding is, are you grinding steel or are you grinding flammable or explosive dusts? In which case you would either need to look at if they weren't flammable, then you'd have a wide range of options, and if they were flammable or explosive, then you would look at perhaps finding a system that's only going to extract that one kind of dust, so you're not mixing metals, or you'd look into a wet collector. And again, with the grinding, can you combine this system to extract a multitude of things? You can see in this picture we've got the Protecto Extract Top, which can extract not only steel grinding, but it can extract MIG, TIG and MMA welding fume at the same time, so the worker could do all of their work processes on this bench at once. And these are the sort of things that's worth considering to keep those costs down, so you're not buying multiple pieces of extraction. The next thing they asked us to look at was our oil mist extraction. So the thing we want to consider is how many pieces of CNC machinery I've got, how many extraction points are we extracting oil from? Are there any size constraints? So would it be more effective to have one large unit, one centralized unit extracting from multiple machines, or a machine for each of our CNC machines? The other thing you probably want to consider is, do you want to recycle oil to save on costs? And the other thing a lot of people forget on oil mist extraction is what sort of service requirements the machine has, because unlike other machines, you do have to do a fair bit more in terms of maintenance and servicing yearly on oil mist extraction. So it's those sort of things you need to have in your mind. And finally, they asked us to get onto thorough examination and testing. So this is a legal requirement under HSG 258, which is a document you can find at the HSE's website. It's free to download. These have to be done at least once in every period of 14 months. There are a couple of special cases. One of them doesn't matter in the UK because we don't do jute manufacturing in the UK anymore. But the other special cases are if you're shot blasting metal castings and you're doing it and you're extracting that, then you'll need to have that tested every 6 months. Or if you're grinding for more than 12 hours a week throughout the year, then you'll need to have those grinding extractors tested 6 monthly as well. The other thing, the main thing the TXT does is ensure that the LEV was working as intended. So if it's a brand new unit, you have to have it commissioned and tested to make sure that it's working to the manufacturer's specs. And if it's a sort of 3, 4, 5-year-old unit, then you'll need to have it tested yearly to make sure that it's still working within those specs and to make sure that it's maintained well. And then this test will obviously raise any potential problems that you have with the unit, or sort of give you a few things to watch out for before the next test, so you can keep on top of them. So it's essentially like an MOT for your LEV. And that's about it for lecherous sheet metal. So if you do need any more specific details on all of our fume extraction units, you can look at our video links below for the high vacuum, high volume mobile, fixed and downdraft extraction benches, and there will be a few extraction focused videos on some of our more specific pieces of machinery and what they can be used most effectively on.